Welcome back to Elimu Digital, the podcast exploring the intersection of technology, leadership, and the future of African education. I'm your host, Cindy. Today we are diving into a concept, revolutionizing student success, the data-driven classroom. This is using analytics to save students. Now, for decades, even especially in Kenya, the end of term report card is the first and often the only indicator that a student is struggling. So today we're discussing how actionable analytics and real-time assessments allow for immediate intervention before students fall from the cracks. Joining me to unpack this shift is Dr. Wandera, CEO of TFA Learning. Dr. Wandera, it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Cindy. This is one of the most critical topics we can discuss because it fundamentally just shifts how we view the timeline of learning.
Yes. So with that, let's get started right there with the timeline. I've heard you compare traditional grading to an autopsy. So what do you mean by that, and how does a data-driven approach change the narrative?
Yeah, autopsy, I know it's a harsh word, but it's accurate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In the traditional or the static model, we know that students rely heavily on summative assessments. We know that the big midterm is coming or the final exam. Those are the things that people care about. But when a student fails the exam, the teacher is essentially performing an autopsy. They're looking at failed outcomes that happened weeks or months in the past. So there's no way to resurrect the lost time. What a data-driven classroom does is shift us from the autopsy to the real-time diagnosis. So by using our AI-assisted learning management system like ours, TFA Learning, rely on continuous assessment. We are measuring the heartbeat of the students' learning journey every single day. We're not just waiting at the end. So if there's a dip in the understanding, then we do not find that in December. We find that actually the same day we provide the instruction.
Yes. So when we use words like analytics, data, and algorithms, there's often a fear that we're introducing our children to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. So how do you balance the cold hard data with deeply human art of teaching?
Yeah, the human aspect is really important. This is a very beautiful phrased question, and it's concerns that we hear often from passionate educators. The truth is that data doesn't remove the humanity. It actually enables it. Imagine a teacher with 40 students in a classroom. The teacher desperately wants to connect with every single child, but their human limitations makes it impossible to know exactly what's going on inside the 40 different minds simultaneously. What our platform does, it provides actionable analytics. We are just giving the teacher, we're not just giving the teacher a spreadsheet of raw numbers. What we're doing is that making sure that the teacher can interpret those numbers and take action and change that instruction. Mhm.
So basically, it comes up as an assistant such that it's just tapping the teacher on the shoulder to point them in the right direction.
Exactly, and you nailed it. So the
Mm.
dashboard might highlight a specific insight saying, hey, 8 of your students are completely mastering the concept and are ready for a greater challenge. But these 3 students have missed the last 4 questions. So the data is just a signal. The response to that signal is entirely human. The teacher can now pull those students or 3 students on the side for maybe a 5 high fidelity tutoring session with targeted empathy. So the data doesn't reduce them to numbers, it makes them, those 3 students, visible to the teacher who otherwise might have been lost or been missed in the crowd.
Yes, I understand. And now talking about data, let's talk about how we actually gather it without overwhelming the students. So if we are constantly assessing them, aren't we just inducing test anxiety every single day?
Well, this is the genius of how we design our instruction. So we use UDL, Universal Design Learning, and we also pair that with experiential learning and gamification. So in the TFA learning ecosystem, assessment is not a small dirty word. It doesn't mean a quiet room with a ticking clock and a number two pencils, and students are quietly taking the assessments. Our digital curriculum promotes critical thinking through interactive lessons. So when a student is engaging with the platform, they might be matching pairs, solving a puzzle, or participating in a scenario-based simulation. To the student, it
Mhm.
feels like they're playing. It feels like engagement. But in the background, every action is a micro assessment mapped directly to the competency-based education requirements.
And this seems like it ties perfectly into your pedagogical framework. Can you remind our listeners how the PCTF loop factors into all this?
Thank you. So the PCTF stands for plan,
Mhm.
connect, teach, and feedback. So we intentionally plan for the content and let the teacher connect with the student, know the student weaknesses, teach, and then provide feedback. So the analytics power or the feedback loop is very essential because the assessments are real time, the feedback is instantaneous. So if a student goes or gets a concept wrong, the system immediately provides a localized, contextualized hint to guide them to the right answer. So we're just not logging failure, we're actively trying to connect the misconception in that moment. So I agree that the continuous feedback is a secret sauce to mastery. It prevents small misunderstandings from snowballing into massive deficits in education. Mhm.
Very, very insightful. Now, coming back to our today's episode, which is using analytics to serve students, can you just walk us through a practical scenario of a student being saved by this technology?
Great. So let's take a look at the heated moment right now, the transition to junior secondary school, which is critical function point of contention in Kenya right now. So you have a student, let's call him Juma. Uh, Juma was a great student in primary school, but suddenly the subjects are more complex and the reading material is denser. In traditional class, Juma might start acting out, or perhaps he just goes quiet and hides in the back row. A teacher might assume that Juma has behavior issue or has lost motivation. But in a TFA learning classroom, Juma is using digital modules. The analytics track his engagement time and his success on specific competencies. So the dashboard alerts Juma's teacher that Juma is reading comprehension is just fine, but his time on task just dropped to zero during advanced science vocabulary modules. So the teacher can now act on those really actionable information.
So basically, if the teacher immediately knows the root cause.
Exactly. Yes, it's
Mm.
not behavioral, it's specific academic roadblock. So the teacher intervenes the same week. They provide localized content to help David Juma with the science vocabulary. He catches and then returns, and then he stays engaged. So without real-time analytics, Juma might have failed in the first JSS exams, lost his confidence entirely, and started downward spiral. That is what we mean by saying a student, it's about catching them from a moment they trip rather than waiting to hit the ground.
That would have really been helpful in my day. I feel like a Juma here in this example.
Yes.
Um, and so I imagine for school leaders listening, this kind of continuous monitoring isn't just about saving individual students, but rather about the institutional health in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Yes. So
Mhm.
precisely. So for administrator, this actionable analytics scales up. A school director can now open the dashboard and see exactly how a grade 7 is performing against the CBE benchmarks of the entire institution. It doesn't take guesswork out of the resources allocation. Uh, and they can use that information to decide what resources can be allocated to professional development. Mhm.
That's quite insightful, Dr. Wandera. So the transition from trailing indicators to leading indicators, from autopsies to real-time diagnosis, is clearly the future of education in Africa, as I can tell. So before we wrap up, what is your challenge to the educators and administrators tuning in today?
So my challenge is for educators and administrators is to
Mhm,
stop waiting for the end of the term to find out how your students are learning. Technology exists right now to
mhm,
build a unified environment where every student's progress is visible and every teacher is empowered to act. So we shouldn't let the lack of data be the reason a brilliant student fails behind.
mhm. Yes, that's very true. And so for those who are ready to make the shift to a data-driven classroom, how can they partner with you?
We know we're very happy. So if you visit us, tutorforafrica.com, whether you're looking to a pilot program in a single classroom or you're looking for an LMS across your institution, we have the scalable, localized solutions to help you. So reach out to us and let's start mapping out your digital transformation. We're excited to always partner and bring in folks who are really ready for the innovation.
Sounds like TFA Learning is definitely ready to do that and transform the digital ecosystem in terms of the school and school health and institutional area. So, Dr. Wandera, I want to thank you once again for your time and your vision in joining us in this podcast.
Thank you, Cindy, for having me as always. Mhm.
All right, that's all for today's episode of Elimu Digital. We hope you walked away today inspired to turn your classroom data into your greatest teaching tool. So be sure to subscribe to the show, and until next time, keep innovating and keep striving for achievement.